Ndidi Nwuneli is the founder of Leap Africa, one of Nigeria's leading non-profit organizations. She is co-founder of Ace Food Processing and Distribution, an indigenous agro-processing company, and also a partner at Sahel Capital, which is an advisory and private equity firm focused on the agribusiness sector in West Africa. She has 20 years of experience in international and entrepreneurship development. Ndidi holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a BSc with honors from Wharton, United States of America. Ndidi has been recognized as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum and has received a national honor as member of the Federal Republic from the Nigerian government. Ndidi serves on numerous international and local boards, including Nestle Nigeria PLC, Cornerstone Insurance PLC, and Nigerian Breweries PLC. She is married to Nwuneli, her husband of 15 years, and their marriage is blessed with children. Rolake Akinkugbe is the head Energy and Natural Resources at FBN Capital. Prior to this role, Rolake was the head of the Energy and Oil and Gas Research Team at EcoBank for more than 3 years. Her specialist areas include global energy, African oil and gas markets, oil and gas financing trends and infrastructure challenges, sustainable energy solutions, the power sector, and natural resource policy. She's a regular media commentator and presenter on global and African energy and natural resources, and has been a regular reviewer of global newspaper headlines on BBC World News since 2012. A classical pianist by training, Rolake enjoys jazz and contemporary piano in her spare time. She has a bachelor's and a master's degree from the London School of Economics. Shola Adeola is a seasoned professional with over 16 years of business and management experience in finance, telecoms, logistics, retail, and transportation across Europe and Africa. He is the CEO of Nigeria's largest online mall, Konga Online Shopping Limited. Prior to joining Konga, Shola was in charge of financial planning and budgeting at Etisalat, Nigeria. He has also worked with the Vodafone Group and was a finance business partner in several organizations in the UK. Shola is a well-rounded business executive and holds an MBA from Cranfield University. He's a fellow of the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants and holds a bachelor's degree in business studies from London South Bank University. He is married to Bolanle Adekoya, and their marriage is blessed with children. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and welcome our 3 speakers as they share on the power to create sustainable wealth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's really nice to be here on this stage, sharing our thoughts and experiences with you. And a lot has been said prior to that. We heard from Pastor Ayor about the vision of the Marketplace Alliance and the work that KSPA is doing. And really, I think there's a special, unique element when you have people from the house. You know, we could all well easily be on the other side of this stage now. So I hope that part of what we will be saying here and the expose we'll be giving will really touch a very personal note with you, and you can actually see a lot of your personal and professional experiences through what we're doing. So the topic is beyond oil. And I remember I was talking in the green room when we were waiting that I'm glad they didn't actually say beyond gas. I'm personally an energy specialist, and if you know anything about the energy industry, it certainly goes beyond oil. But in 2011, I remember when I was heading the energy research team at EcoBank, I was based in London at the time, and I was covering about 35 African countries. And we'd started to do some research at the time on the shale oil and gas revolution, and we'd published several papers which had predicted what would happen in the market today. And of course, everybody was talking about the implications that would have for business, for industry. But I had a bit of a light bulb moment in terms of my personal career future. So I said to myself, for many years, I've tried to build up my expertise in natural resources with a huge focus on hydrocarbons and particularly oil and gas. I'd had some broad exposure to the power sector and sustainable energy. So I thought to myself, here we are, the world is going to be oversupplied in a few years' time with lots of oil and gas. That means prices are going to come down. How can I, as Rolake personally, as a professional, position myself to still remain relevant in the global marketplace? So that was the beginning of a long personal professional journey that saw me embark on a time to build my expertise in sustainable energy. And if you know anything about sustainable energy, it's a broad term we use to cover and describe everything from renewables to solar to power to biomass to wind, etc. And the reason I highlight this story right at the beginning is the world is constantly changing. If we've seen and heard the story, I don't know how many people here have read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? It's the story about Hem and Haw and Scurry and Sniff, these 4 little mouses. And it's essentially saying that if you don't move and evolve, you'll be left behind in the game. And really, I think my idea is that in 10 years' time, I still want to be relevant as a professional. So I may not be an entrepreneur, but I still want to be relevant and marketable to a broad range of potential employers. But the interesting thing is, when you make a decision that you're going to change, you're going to evolve, you're going to embark on a journey of personal and professional development, God does have a funny way of opening doors for you, opening doors. So a couple of years before that journey I started to take, I actually started to look at how I could help build the capacity of sustainable energy entrepreneurs and people who had great ideas around renewable energy technology. And earlier this year, I set up a platform, www.inotide.com, which in Yoruba language literally means light has come. And it's a platform, a curated platform, looking at helping sustainable energy entrepreneurs find funding. So there were 2 pieces of the puzzle here. I'd worked in financial services, so I had an idea of the financial network, the investor network. But I was also embarking on a course of professional development around renewable energy in order to ensure that my skill set remained relevant. And I think that is a really good and useful opener for a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. And I would personally ask you to reflect on these as we look to hear a lot of what our speakers are saying. So without further ado, and you'll be hearing a bit more from me further down the line around what my thoughts are on the energy and natural resources opportunities in Nigeria and the wider region, because we are blessed with an abundance of resources, and I'm sure some of you will be seeing that in the news. So our first speaker today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Shola Adeola. You've seen it, so I'm not going to say too much, and I'm going to let Shola talk for about 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll hear about his experience as CEO of Conga and the other little things which might surprise you that he actually gets his hands involved in. So please welcome Shola. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolake. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shola Adeola, as has been introduced. I'm the CEO at Conga.com, and I'm also a farmer. So I joined Conga back in 2013 as a CFO, and obviously I rose through the rank to CEO position. And also, I started my farm back in 2012. It was conceived in 2011, and I went live July 2012. And before I move into Beyond Oil, because the theme of today is Beyond Oil, I would still like to share my view about the oil industry. So for people who are currently sitting in the oil industry or somehow active in the industry, I think first of all we need to understand the boom and bust cycles. So it's not particularly great at the moment. The prices are down, and I think the reason why it's this difficult is because we didn't save. Usually, boom and bust, you save during the boom periods, and it lasts you through the bust. Prices will surely come back up. Price of oil is already on the way back up. At least it's $50 per barrel now. And if you look at the Bible, if you remember the story of Joseph, there's 7 years of plenty, 7 lean years. And I think, and when I look at this, for me, if you're in that industry, do as much as you can in there. It's not for you to start pulling out and start running elsewhere. And I think what the reason why people are, should I say, panicking now, I think it's lack of vision. A long-term vision, not, I kind of Googled vision the other day, and it was talking about ideas, things that you haven't seen, but things that are not present in the physical, but you've seen it in your mind. And I think a lot of people are moved by sight. The things that you see, what someone says, or this is the new business, so I just jump into it, I do it. So I think in terms of perspective, I think we all need to have something of what I call long-term vision. And your long-term vision is what brings you into wealth that is sustainable. So your wealth can be sustainable if it's not long-term. If your vision is not long-term. And for myself, and this, so a lot of people, so I say that people think it's more for entrepreneurs, but this is actually not just for entrepreneurs, it's also for employees. So I see myself as both an employee and an entrepreneur. Employee in Conga, and weekends you find me on the farm, literally walking around my pineapple farm. And why do I think vision is super important for us all? It's simply because my journey didn't just happen. I didn't just join Conga. I didn't just start a farm. I told you I started the farm back in 2012. I joined Conga in 2013. I moved back to Nigeria back in 2010. And around about 2005, I decided, I was working in the UK back then, I decided I was going to move back to Nigeria. And I said to myself, how will I move back into Nigeria? And I had a long-term plan for that. Look, it will be through telecom. I had made up my mind way back in 2005 that I will come into Nigeria through telecom. I did it in 2010. And what that meant was that I made choices. The jobs that I took, I was living in the UK then. I took a job in Germany. So I flew to Germany, between London and Germany, every weekend. And I paid the price. And less than 2 years later, Etisalat reached out. And even me deciding to come to Nigeria wasn't because I just wanted to come back home. It was simply because I felt the opportunities in Nigeria are huge. And we're not doing anything about it. If you look at the developed countries, the tiniest of ideas, you find really big companies occupying them, trading in that area. And so, in a way, my coming back to Nigeria was well planned, was well thought of. I had a vision, and I was praying about it, and I took steps. Not only did that happen, when I got back into Nigeria, I read this report, it was from the Oxford Business Group. It's the Nigeria report. So I said to myself, look, there's so many opportunities. Let me read this report and find out what we import and try to substitute it. And I saw that we imported tomato in large quantities. And that's where the trigger came for agriculture. And then I started researching around it. I got really interested into it. I paired myself with one of my staff back then who was into farming, and he took me through, this is what we do, this is cassava, and I looked at different plants. And ultimately, I settled for pineapple. These days, if I sleep and wake up, I'm Conga and then I'm pineapple. I'm thinking both at every point in time. But what's interesting is all of these things, we don't open our mind. We don't open our mind sometimes. So I do pineapples now. I'm finding out that you can actually make shoes from pineapples. Shoes. Puma now does some shoes from pineapples. Pineapple leaves. And, I go onto YouTube. YouTube, these days of technology, you need to expand your mind to begin to read. YouTube is there. You just need to pay for data, read. People upload all sorts of things onto YouTube and use it to learn. But anyway, so that's my personal story. And please, I said that intentionally because I'm going to go through some sectors, some opportunities that I see from where I stand today that I would like to tell people, and people should research more and get into, but also for employees. So when I mention these industries, it's not just for entrepreneurs, it's also for you to set yourself up and say, look, if I want to be involved in agriculture one way or the other, do I need to get competence? Do I need to start learning around agriculture. What do I need to do? What courses do I need? Since 2000, I took upon myself to train myself. I reserved a portion of my salary, and I didn't wait for any company to train me. And I trained myself all the way through to today. In farming, I trained myself. Before I started farming, I went to Ghana. I went to Ghana for a whole weekend, walking around the different farms. So you have to build yourself up. Even if it's an employee or an entrepreneur, you have to build capacity. So I'll just not to, because I only have, how many minutes left? Some few minutes left. I'll very quickly go into the different opportunities that I see, and I think people should take time out to research and see if it fits within. You can build another thing is, some people, you can't build vision, but align yourself to somebody's vision. You can't build visions, but align yourself to someone's vision. When Joseph sold in the Bible, when they sold the grains in the lean years, there were traders that made money, because he said his brothers came to buy. So there will have been smaller traders that were reselling, and they made money too. So you can align yourself to somebody else's vision. So I'm going to quickly go into, and please, if it's a vision, it tends to last. It's not a short. If you look at Joseph's Potiphar's dream that Joseph was over 14 years, 7 years. So it's not short term. So meaning that whatever it is that you do, you can't be thinking 3 months, 6 months, next 1 year. You have to think long term. Anyway, like I said, be moved by vision and not by sight or what you hear. Let me just quickly go. First, and also, look, Nigeria, 180 million people. Some people argue we're only 120 million. You know, when you look at geography, Ghana, Cameroon, why can we be so 180? But ignoring that, there are only 13 countries out of 195 that have more than 100 million people. Only 13. And Nigeria is one of them. So we're very lucky, all of us, we're very lucky to be around, to be able to serve such a huge market. We can't ignore, and that market has needs. And for you to make wealth, it means that you're providing solution to someone's needs. So as a nation, 100 million people, you now need to provide needs. There are different types of needs, and that's what I'm going to go into. So first of all, basic needs of life. There's air. Thank God we don't have to pay tax or pay anything on air. I mean, Lagos State will have chased us. But at least it's free. But guess what? Some people are canning oxygen and selling to hospitals. Get oxygen into bottles, sell to hospitals, and they're making money in Nigeria. Alternative is to go and import. We all know what the exchange rate is doing. So it becomes super expensive. If you can oxygen in Nigeria, you would make good money. That's air. Water. Some people are doing, you can look at Seaway water, you can Cascade water, all sorts of brands are out there. But guess what? Talk to a lot of people here that live in Lekki 1. One way or the other, the water that they pump out of the floor or out of the ground is still dirty. They need to treat it. Can you treat water? Can you come up with technology that treats it easily? So people need to expand their minds. When pure water started, nobody thought about it. And it's still the same water, just in packaging. So we just need to expand our minds. There are problems, and for you to make money, you need to be a solution to a problem. That's water. I'll talk about food, and food now gets you into agriculture. I can talk for agriculture like all day. There's so many opportunities, logistics, specialized logistics. When my first harvest for pineapples, I couldn't find one person that will move it from the farm to the ready buyer. Someone had said, I will take everything. It was in my farm, just outside Ibadan, an hour and a half. I couldn't find a truck that would deliver it at 8 a.m. in the morning. The only ones I found would deliver at 4 a.m. in the morning, simply because they don't have the paper, so they have to work in the middle of the night and quickly turn back to Ibadan. So if you can find credible people that will do logistics, it's there. We have, and this is what I know personally, we have strawberries rotting away in Jos. All we need is cold transportation. So there's a lot of opportunities. And guess what? Sometimes even at work, you want to eat healthy lunch. Apart from the amala and begari, you want to eat healthy lunch. Where do you get good salad. And guess what? Some people are planting lettuce and it's rotting away. So that's food. I will quickly, let's see. Shelter, clothing. We import too many. At Conga, we import, up until last year, we used to sort of like try to work with people that would bring in clothes into Nigeria and we sell. And that's what we're still doing. But what you find is that we're trying to build an ecosystem for fashion. And it's difficult. There are only very few players in that area that actually manufacture shirts. That actually, and look at, most people here, I would say 70% have shirt or something that they're wearing. And we're not producing a lot in Nigeria. Everything is imported. If you can produce, it reduces the cost and people will patronize. And what we see as well is that a lot of people buy, as long as it's good quality and the price is right, people will buy. We've seen that in Conga very, very clearly. I'll talk about, shelter, I wouldn't go into that. Energy, and I'm not talking about the NEPA type energy. What happened to solar panels? We're not building them. I've only seen one person that literally built in Nigeria, and it's a foreigner coming to Nigeria to build solar panels. We're not building alternative power. I'll quickly go into education, short courses. One thing I miss about London is that, and I still say today, one day when I have time, I'll go to London and learn how to sew dresses for my daughters. I have 3 girls and a wife. I want to know, sometimes the frustration of why would you sew it and it's like this. I want to learn myself. But there are short courses. If you go to the UK, people bring people together, short courses, learn, and everybody moves on. So education is still important. So there's some schools out there that collect school fees daily. And when you collect 50 naira, 100 naira daily, it becomes a lot of money at the end of the month. Mechanical and equipment construction. My farm, we built a tanker. We went to one reputable company in Nigeria, and they gave us a price of 2.8 million naira. And I'm like, this tanker, I'll go and build it. Myself and my dad in Ibadan, we spent 800K. We built that same thing, a bigger one, that works, and I had spare pump to use on the farm. Saved 2 million naira. And guess what? If we did that commercially, that's like 2 million naira margin. That same company brought in 20. By the time we went there were only 8 left. So they had sold 12. So please, we need to develop, and this thing was just a welder that we used. But anyway, technology, software development, there isn't enough. I work in Conga, we're big in terms of technology. In fact, we consider ourselves as a tech company. People think of us as retail, we consider ourselves as a tech company. We don't have enough. We don't have enough developers in Nigeria. Technology to improve how we do things, how our livelihoods. I spoke about agriculture, fertilizers. I wouldn't just think about fertilizers, logistics I mentioned, irrigation, even training in agriculture. Training people before they enter into, a lot of people, there's this agric wave now. What about training in agriculture? It's not happening. We don't have enough. I made a lot of mistakes that I wouldn't have made if I got local training, because I could only find it abroad, and then it was their practices that I brought. Greenhouses, we can build them. These things are not rocket science. I'll quickly, I've spoken about logistics, cold chain, e-commerce, which is in my space. Now, the general merchandise e-commerce place is already big, it's crowded. I don't want to discourage you from doing it, so I don't feel like, I don't want competition. I don't mind it, but I just feel like, look, the capital required to build one is a lot. But if you can't build one, can you trade on one? We have people, and I'm not kidding, people that have built fashion lines, or should I say brands, off the back of selling on Conga, makeup lines, all sorts, that they've literally quit their 9-to-5 job, and all they're doing is selling on Conga today. And it's not one, and I mean it, we have a lot across categories. Some even shutting down their normal store to sell online. So if you can't build one, join one. But then there's still space for curated e-commerce, where you just focus on a particular niche section and you sell online. There's still space for that, but please, be mindful of the need for technology. I mentioned earlier on software development. We had to import a lot of it. And we have like 130 engineers today, just software developers, just building that front end that you see. About 130 engineers just developing software for it. So it's still there. The opportunity is there. More and more Nigerians will buy online. And I even retail. Look at Ebano, and I'll just leave it at Ebano. I was checking the other day. ShopRite now has about 20 stores, about 24, 27 stores across Nigeria. Where are we? Why are we not taking up this opportunity? Corner shops are not springing up left, right, and center. And leisure. Now that dollar is expensive, where will people chill out? Why don't you build something for it? Why don't you create, I'll leave that. Medical, our president is currently abroad. That's all I can say. If you can just build, how much will you charge for the president to come to your hospital? Just think about the president comes to get treated in your hospital. Just think about it. And manufacturing in the very long term. But in the very, very long term, I also think I'm just going to highlight these areas for people to go and research. Younger people, I would say, who are tech savvy. Artificial intelligence, it's coming. Robotics, it's coming. 3D printing, it's coming. Nanotechnology and space exploration. Whilst we're still thinking about these basic things in Nigeria, when you go abroad, when you talk to this guy, literally, there are treaties, as we speak today, people have signed treaties not to take much more land in space. There's a treaty that says that you only take land where you land. They've started agreeing, and we're still talking about food and healthcare. So please, I just need people to really go and research about those areas, and let's start preparing, opening our minds. And I'm going to leave this, and please, to achieve all of this, to effectively attack these opportunities, you need to build character. It doesn't just happen day one. If you ask a lot of businesses, you started small, grew. So you don't just expect to get to the very end in day one. And build knowledge, learn, and then there has to be passion. You can't be jumping from one business to the other. And please, this applies to employees as well. Align yourself to the future. And one thing that I'll leave you guys with this. At Conga, since January, we haven't seen a dip in our revenues. And we're going through, if next month's prediction is right, Nigeria will officially go into recession. Two quarters of, negative, 2 quarters of negative growth will push you into recession. And why? Simply because what we do is we look for people's needs. When there was no power, we sold generators. We sold solar panels. When people had money, fashion. When they had money, cell phones. If they don't have money, sell a different type of phone. Don't just say, oh, Nigeria is bad. Serve a need, and you'll be fine, and you'll be sustainable. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Shola, for that really diverse expose. I'm sure a lot of people, I saw people writing in the front row there. I'm seeing my brethren from One Music writing furiously. But before we move on to Ndidi, I mean, there are a couple of things I picked up in there is about the consistency, right? I thought that was a really interesting point because in Nigeria, we have a lot of the bandwagon mentality, and as soon as we hear of a new fad, people kind of rush into that. That I heard, but he mentioned research and knowledge. And one thing I found is when I started thinking of all these wonderful things I wanted to do, because I was one of those who came to Nigeria with a save the world mentality, I had a reality check. I had to really get a realistic sense of judgment of my own strengths and weaknesses as an individual. We know we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us, but we all need a realistic assessment of what are my skills and are they relevant in the world in which I live today? And I think that was one of the things that I really picked up on that. So I just wanted us to hold those thoughts. And as you're listening, please jot down your questions because when we come to the Q&A, you may forget. So it gives me great pleasure to move on to a different theme, which I think will complement this, and welcome the lovely Ndidi to tell us about her journey and the opportunities. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here today. When I was coming in, I saw Pastor Tony, and I told him that he's been a big part of my story. And when I moved back here at 25, he actually came to visit me in my office to find me, to encourage me to continue this work, and counseled us before we got married, and actually officiated our wedding. So this church has been such an important part of my journey, and I just thank all of you for the sacrifices you make in holding people up and carrying the little girls and helping them become women. Thank you. That's my testimony. So I have some slides I wanted to go through really quickly, because otherwise I'll talk for as long as my brother. And you gave him close to 20 minutes. So how many minutes do I have? All right. So we'll just go through them really quickly. So I'm going to talk about Beyond Oil, and I think Rolake addressed my first point, which is that I think a lot of people need to start off asking themselves first, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? What are my passions? I think on this pulpit every Sunday we hear that God has deposited something within you, and everybody in this room has a unique calling. And you need to figure that out. You need to do a self-assessment. Please go back to the previous slide. For me, very early on, I realized that what drove me was anger. For some people, it's joy. What gives them joy? What do they enjoy doing? What do they get excited about? What are they willing to do for free? How do they handle pressure? You need to do a thorough self-assessment, because if you don't, you might end up saying, okay, I'm going to go into artificial intelligence, but I really hate computers. I hate software. I hate math. Why am I going into artificial intelligence again? It doesn't make sense. So you need to do a self-assessment and really understand what God has called you to do and where your talents lie. The second thing you need to do as a budding entrepreneur, someone who wants to look beyond oil, is that you have to scan your environment. God allows you to see certain things that other people can't see, but you have to be sensitive to the Spirit of God in your life. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What frustrations do you experience? What do others say they need? What are others complaining about? What frustrations do you experience personally? If you experience them and you talk to 10 other people and they have the same frustrations, then there's something there. You need to do a little more digging. The funny thing is that a lot of us have closed our eyes to what's going on around us. And other people come into our country and they see those gaps that we don't see, and they start the business, and you say, I never thought of it that way, or I didn't see that opportunity. This is a wake-up call for you to start seeing things differently. And I'll illustrate this by my own personal examples. So quickly, as I think about my own personal examples, like my brother here, in 2008, I had the opportunity to live in Senegal, and it was not a pleasant opportunity that led us there. Many of you know the story behind why we moved to Senegal. But when I was in Senegal, my husband joined a private equity fund, and I said, 2007, I went to a conference. I was asked to speak in Oslo on the Africa Green Revolution, sitting in a room like this with 200 people. It was called the Africa Green Revolution. Of the 200 people, only 14 were Africans. So I was wondering what was happening, first of all. The second thing is that as they reeled out statistics about agriculture in Africa, and they said things like, only 4% of our land is irrigated. Only 8% of our farmers use fertilizer. I started thinking, are you kidding? What's going on? Why don't we see opportunity? Why have we left this sector to other people to run? They also said that one extension worker for 9,000 farmers. One extension worker for 9,000 farmers. I couldn't understand it. So I said there was a reason why I was invited to this conference. So when I moved to Senegal, I had to start consulting. And while I was consulting, I said, let me spend time consulting in agriculture. I know how to do management consulting. Let me do it in agriculture. And I started seeing things and opportunities. And coming to Nigeria, and when you think about the challenges in Nigeria and the opportunities in Nigeria, we only use about 48% of the arable land in our country. So we have so much untapped land that's not being cultivated. We're the #1 producer of cassava, yam, and cowpea in the world. The #2 producer of sweet potato, cashew, and okra in the world. And yet, when you go abroad, you see Nigerian cashew on shelves. Where does it say it's made? India, Vietnam. What do you think? They're taking it from West Africa, they're shelling it in India, they're packaging it, and they're bringing it back here. Sesame, the number 4 producer in the world. That means that most McDonald's buns, hamburger buns, have sesame from Nigeria. Sesame oil from Nigeria. Products that have sesame from Nigeria. So we have so much untapped potential, and this is something that was presented to me on a platter. Do you know the opportunities here? Where are the educated people? Who have we left agriculture for? Now, he's talked about opportunities in logistics, but there are so many opportunities in processing, and I'll talk a bit about them. So in 2009, I also started feeling a push from God to look into this agriculture bit, not just from a consulting perspective, but actually to enter the space. Because I did a study for a large multinational that wanted to enter Nigeria and found out that at the time, 41% of Nigerian children were stunted. 41%. Now, stunting affects what? Brain development. The first 2 years of a child's life, if they're they don't eat proper nutritious food, their brains don't develop. And this company, a large company, I don't want to mention the name, wanted to come into Nigeria to serve nutritious food to Nigerians. And so we started looking at this space, saying, we import 90% of the processed food we eat. 60% of our farmers work, 60% of our population works in agriculture. Yet, we have such a high rate of malnutrition. What's happening to the food? Most of the food is going to waste. Fruits and vegetables, 40 to 60% go to waste. And that's because we don't process. We like to eat fresh food. It's easier to buy fresh food in the market. People want quick money. Nobody wants to process. So we decided to start a food company that would process food, sourced from farmers for the local market. Now, was it easy? No, it wasn't easy. Go back, please. But I want to just tell you quickly that we decided our first year was going to be jams. And I'm going to tell you this quick story because you've heard great ideas, but we won a business plan competition, and our first year was going to be jams. And we actually figured out a couple of things. One, glass, you can't import glass into Nigeria. Two, we have a monopoly on sugar in Nigeria. So our business plan had sugar at 6,000 naira a bag. In 4 months, it jumped to 12,000 naira a bag. The third thing we found out, which is very important when you think about beyond oil, is that Nigerians did not want pineapple jam. They didn't want guava jam, agbalumo jam, which is actually fantastic. What do they want? Strawberry jam. So we started making watermelon jam and having to color it because Nigerians wanted strawberry jam. So the truth is that the first year we spent all our time on jam, producing very exotic jam and only catering to a very small percentage of the population. And what were we getting at glass? At dump sites. We had scavengers picking up glass. We would sterilize the glass, cover the tops, and use recycled glass for our jams. But that didn't stop us. Our year 3 plan was going to be spices. So we quickly reevaluated and found out that most of the noodle companies were importing all the spices that they use. In fact, many of them still do. The most popular one still does. I won't mention its name. So the point is, we went to them and said, can we sell to you in 25 kg sacks? And that's how we started our business. And now we're in all the major supermarkets selling 12 spice products, and we've added a complementary food. I want to say this because it's important to realize that everything is not smooth sailing, and you don't start off with one idea and immediately make $1 million. So what are some other opportunities in food? We've talked about the growing youth population. Go back, please. The youth population presents a tremendous opportunity, not just in food, in everything. What are young people excited about? What do they like to do? That's a huge opportunity for us. The rising food costs presents a fantastic opportunity for what? Small size of products, single-serve products. If you go to the market, what do you see them doing? They take sugar, they take flour, and they put it in little plastic bags. Why don't we repackage for people to be able to afford it? In Senegal, you can get a squeeze of a toothpaste. You can get half a carrot, and you can get half a cabbage. Because the average person wants to make fried rice, but they can't afford a whole cabbage. So there are opportunities around single-serve, single-use items for all of us to consider. There's also still a growing middle class in spite of the setback, and that presents tremendous opportunities around healthy and aspirational food products. We see the proliferation right now of fresh fruit juices, but there's still an opportunity there because we need them that can last. We need fruit juices that can last longer than 2 weeks. What about changing taste buds? If you had asked me if Cold Stone would have done well in Nigeria, I would have told you no. I said, how would anybody spend 1,000 naira on ice cream? Meanwhile, all of you have been victims of Cold Stone. You've gone and spent 1,000 naira on ice cream. Why? Because it's aspirational. Because you feel cool. Because you think it's better than fan ice. The point is, what are they appealing to? They're appealing to your desire to be Hawaiian. And they're fooling all of you. What about the desire for convenience? Everybody here realizes how far we've come. My grandmother's generation would not eat spaghetti. My grandmother used to say it looks like worms. Now, what are we doing? We're serving our children very unnutritious food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is because of our desire for convenience. There are tremendous opportunities around convenience foods, around convenience products, and yet many of us are missing these opportunities. So think about the trends and think about how to take advantage of them. To address the issue of malnutrition, ACE introduced a product to fight moderate malnutrition. That's like a breakfast cereal. It's okay, go up. In addition to our work with agriculture, I want to talk about financing. Because God also opened a door for financing in agriculture, where through Sahel, we're actually investing in other businesses in agriculture. And we have a private equity fund that makes $3 to $5 million investments in agriculture businesses. So there is money available for people in agriculture right now. And we have invested in a dairy company in Kanu and an oil palm company in Kwara. And we have other investments in the pipeline. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about is what makes you angry. So I told you that I was angry that we had such high rates of malnutrition, and I was angry that we were importing so much food. I was also angry about the concept of leadership and the fact that many people in our society, we call them leaders instead of rulers, instead of people in positions of authority. So I felt that we needed to change mindset. So in 2002, God led me to start an organization called Leap Africa. And Leap Africa is not a for-profit, it's a non-profit. But there are opportunities in the non-profit space, tons of opportunities. What we say is that wherever there are gaps that the private sector has not filled and the public sector has not filled, that gap is what? For the social sector. And there is funding for credible social organizations in Nigeria. So if God is laying on your heart to start something to change lives, please don't be deterred by the fact that you'll be poor. Think about setting up a credible organization that can change lives, because if you're credible, if you're transparent, if you're doing good work that's measurable and effective, funding will chase you. So through LEAP, we've really made a difference in the lives of entrepreneurs. And one of the things we teach, which I want to touch on, is the issue of governance. Every business, regardless of how small, has to have a board of directors. Every business. And many times we say, we're too small, I just have an idea. From the idea stage, I set up a board of directors. Because I didn't study food science and agriculture, my husband didn't either, so we found people who studied quality control, food science, technology, to sit on our board. They can help you fill the gaps that you don't have if God has led you in a certain direction. Now, I'll end with some advice. Number one, I've said don't be a copycat. Ask God, what have you called me to do? Number two, scan your environment and find opportunities there. Number three, make sure your business and your idea is investment ready. There's more money in Nigeria chasing entrepreneurs than entrepreneurs chasing money. You don't believe me, but ask every private equity, venture capital firm in this country. They can't find investments, businesses that are ready for money, because many of us are not disciplined. You have to have a positive track record, you have to have prove your market opportunity, and you have to demonstrate that you're ready to be diligent and effective. And there are many financing options to consider. I was challenged one day by a young lady, Mira Mehta. I talk about her all the time. She came up with an idea to cultivate tomato in Nasarawa. But what did she do? She set up a crowdfunding video called Tomato Jaws. If any of you have watched it, you'll be amazed that an American can come to our country and, through a video, raise money for her business from people who don't even know her. And she raised first $50,000 and then multiple rounds of financing since then. through crowdfunding. Have you guys heard of crowdfunding? Just check out that video. It will challenge you to raise money. But there's so many other opportunities for financing. Finally, I just want to talk about a few things. Integrity. We need to demonstrate integrity through our businesses. We need to commit to excellence in everything we do. And this concept of a life of purpose. My favorite quote from Francis of Assisi says, "There's no use going anywhere to preach unless your preaching is your walking." As entrepreneurs, we have to reflect Christ in what we do. And then, as you think about your future and opportunities beyond oil, please consider this concept. Be the first, but never the last. You can be the first to go to college, the first to make $1 billion through Conga. You can be the first, but how many people are you opening the door for behind you? How many people? And what is that? As we've said on this pulpit, God is only going to bless people who are going to use the resources for his kingdom. And finally, my favorite quote, which says, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others." You cannot embark on an entrepreneurial journey by yourself and expect that you're going to succeed. It's a very lonely and isolating process. That's why this business network and this platform that CPH has set up is so phenomenal, because it's creating a community of entrepreneurs that can support each other. We have to be prepared to go with others to achieve success. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Ndidi. And I was really, really glad you actually mentioned the opportunities in the not-for-profit sector. I don't know how many people have really thought about that as an opportunity. The other thing I thought about when she was speaking, which really resonated with, was this whole issue about crowdfunding. People are making income for themselves by building crowdfunding platforms. So the best way to think about it is, you don't want to be an investor, you don't necessarily want to be an operator, but you have enough knowledge on the market to facilitate some sort of engagement between both sides of the pond. And I think that's a really useful opportunity. Before we open it up to Q&A, I promised at the start that I would sort of highlight a couple of opportunities in the non-oil energy space. But if you look at the second part of the theme, the power to create sustainable wealth, there's an analogy I usually like to give as an energy specialist. One of the reasons why a lot of companies are looking at sustainable energy today is because they recognize that hydrocarbons and fossil fuels are a finite source of energy. So they're looking to more sustainable ways of creating wealth. And one of the ways you can define that is, how do you invest in today without jeopardizing the needs of future generations? And the great thing about sustainable energies like solar, wind, biomass, even waste, is that they are locally available. So when I bring that into the context of the kingdom, and I think about what is sustainable in the sense of kingdom, I think about what are those attributes that are naturally available to us as Christians. And I'm thinking of parts in the Bible that talks about he's giving us all things that pertain to life and godliness. The second point I wanted to make is, when we looked at the telecoms revolutions, there were two things that characterized that. There was a huge demand and a problem that needed to be solved. And there were people that we called first movers, people like Mo Ibrahim of Celtel, who took that move. And they came into an environment where there was no government regulation, and they took the risk, but the government was forced to move. So whilst you can't even be the first mover, you should always even be a close follower. And I see those same opportunities in the energy space. A few months ago, I took a friend of mine who runs a company called Rensource. We drove to Lakey Arts Market. He was doing what you call practical, local, on-the-ground research. And one of the reasons we went to the Lakey Arts Market, there are loads of sellers, and I think there are probably 100-odd sellers, small-time retailers in Lakey Arts Market, and they all use this, I better pass my neighbor generators. And he was offering a distributed, decentralized energy solution. And it's something very similar to the type of inverter or battery solutions. Very low cost. He'd built a network of potential procurement partners in India and other parts of Asia that he felt were useful. And there instantly was an immediate target market right on our doorstep, which is off-grid and is not dependent on government regulation. The other thing I want to talk about was the value chain. The mining sector in Nigeria is a big sector in terms of potential. According to Australian geologists, Nigeria has one of the highest and purest grades of iron ore to be found anywhere in the world, when you compare it to Guinea, Simandou iron ore, or parts of Australia. But the thing is, the truth is, if you're a small-time business person, whilst you can obtain a license, a reconnaissance permit, which the government can award to individuals and not just corporates, finding funding is an issue. So look at what happened in oil and gas. a lot of the companies that are resilient in the energy space are not necessarily exploration and production companies, but also companies that provide services to the oil and gas space. And there's huge scope for mining services. Limestone, which is one of the important feedstock materials for cement, is in huge demand. There are estimated deposits of over 18 million tons in parts of southwest and southeastern Nigeria. I could go on talc. The other issue is gas. Gas, thankfully, we're not talking about beyond gas, because I see gas as an important aspect of sustainable growth. So gas for petrochemicals, gas for fertilizers, gas for plastics. And the thing is, a lot of these things are small-scale solutions, which with the right type of knowledge, armed with the right type of knowledge, we can tap into. And thankfully, our government is creating an environment which is becoming much more of a level playing field. So if you have a bright idea and you have the right resources, you can tap into. And one of the things I just wanted to end with is, those of you who might know me personally, some of my choir mates know that I do quite a lot of speaking engagements. And I remember a few years ago when I started my career in the financial services sector, as part of my role, I was going on a lot of speaking engagements. And one of the things that occurred to me, I mean, these engagements, they take a lot of time to prepare, right? So beyond, putting a presentation together, your travel time, all of that time. So one of the things I said, okay, how can I actually monetize this thing? I'm spending loads of hours between airports, putting together presentations. After all, the knowledge is coming from my head. And believe it or not, I've been able to create an alternative source of income. And you have to be smart about this. So if you're a professional, you're an entrepreneur, you work for a firm, right? Till today, and even from my time in Ecobank, my employer gives me the space to do these things. Why? Two things are critical. I'm going there in my capacity as head of energy and natural resources at FBN Capital. I may not be speaking about energy, but it's of mutual benefit because it gives them the profile they require, and it also allows me to monetize and extract value from a natural given talent that I think God has deposited in me. And the reason I share these things that sometimes we don't really have to look very far. And I remember the story my friend used to tell. They say that just accept the opportunity, accept the job, even if you don't know how to do it. That at least just get in the foot in the door. And I remember the story a friend of mine told me about a guy who was an IT specialist who was looking for a job. And he literally had no clue, but somehow he blagged his way and he bluffed his way through an interview. I'm not suggesting you do that, of course. But there was a particular instance where there was a particular thing that needed to be solved at work. And would you believe this guy? This guy actually went to the toilet, got on the mobile phone to his friend, and was asking for the solution to the problem at work. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that we actually just need to take a step and take a leap of faith. Sometimes we will fail, but we'll never know if we don't try. So I hope we've been able to at least give you some fantastic ideas and some inspiration as to how to move forward in this thing and actually think of sustainable wealth beyond material or physical wealth, but actually think about it in a much natural and creative way, because the Bible does say that God has given us everything that we need to make a success of our lives. Thank you. I think what we're going to do now is open it to Q&A. And you've heard quite a lot. We're going to take questions in 3 batches, in groups of 3. So please keep it very short and succinct. If you must make a comment as opposed to ask a question, please keep it very short. And who wants to be a first mover? So hands up. And I think we have a couple of roving mics going around as well. All right.
Good evening, facilitators and everybody. My question is for Mr. Konga. I heard that thing about the bandwagon effect in Nigeria. And coming from the oil sector and now a budding entrepreneur, I can feel the pulse. Everybody is pushing into agriculture. It's agriculture. And I sat down and I said, I partly grew up in a village and in the city. Half of my adult life was in the village. And I see all my villagers very poor. Not that I can't be a farmer. How would I now go and become a farmer in Lagos? Where will I get the land? I know lands are available. You said all of the arable lands are uncultivated, Ndidi said. And you are sitting down in your office, Monday through Friday. On Saturday, you go to your farm. If your father was not there, would you find a credible manager for that farm to work and make profit? I mean, that's trying to set up a business and having to walk through people and push things through. Sometimes I'm my own secretary, I'm my own, I compile all my bids and all that because I can push the people. But if I'm not on the farm, how would I make money from the farming?
Thank you, and I think Ndidi will answer that question. Another question, please. Can we have the mic here?
Good evening. Thank you for speaking. I find it very interesting that all the speakers today that spoke schooled abroad, and yeah, and indeed most of the people who have come to speak at the Business Wednesdays, at least, I've been coming to most of them this year. Most of them schooled abroad, and it makes me wonder. Maybe what I should do is to get all my money and go abroad and go to school or something, you know. So I would like you guys to speak to this. Thank you.
All right. One more question before we open up to the panel. There's a hand right in the back there near the air condition. There's a hand just there? No? Okay, what about in front, just here?
Good evening all. Thank you very much to the speakers for the very valuable information that you have given us. My simple question is to Mrs. Akinkube. She said that she's learned how to monetize her speaking engagements, but she didn't tell us how, as long as it's not proprietary. Thank you.
I'll answer that question after. So I'll let Ndidi, the question on agriculture and how you monitor from a workplace, or do you want to go first? Shola, please.
So, I think Ndidi said it earlier on about it is not easy. My dad was very influential in me getting the land. My dad, as a matter of fact, when I started, I remember showing my plans, and he said, I don't know what you're doing in this thing. I don't like it. But since you have insisted on doing it, I'll follow you. I bought the land, and because it's my dad, yes, from time to time, he used to, when in the first year, he would go, okay, can you please help me monitor this? But I have a farm manager. I have a structure that works. I have a farm manager. I have a farm operator. I talk to them most evenings. What's the status? And I, how do I call it? I also have a farm consultant. So someone that goes from time to time to put in the right structures and make sure that we're doing the right things at the right time. And then when I go at the weekend, it's just to make sure that we have a program and we're following it. So is it easy? No. Is it because of my dad? No. It's because I put structures in place. And so what's important is that you have to put structures in place. There's no way around it. And yeah, dealing with people, should I say farm laborers, it's not easy. But if you have structures, you have other people that's what they do every day, and they deal with that headache. And that's how I deal with it.
Ace Foods works with 2,500 farmers. We don't have any farmland ourselves. We source from them, and we process for the local market. And they're all over the country. Most of them are actually in Kaduna and Katsina. And we have partnered with a microfinance organization to give them microfinance and training. And the interesting thing about it is, I think when you think about agriculture, everybody thinks about farming. That is a very, very limited assessment of the sector. If your skills are in ICT, you can actually, Nuvos Agro is making money on ICT. What do? They sell data on agriculture. They have people in markets all over the country. If I want to find out the price of corn in Katsina, in Kafanchan, I just call them up, I pay for it, they give me the data. So they're sitting in Lagos, in Ikeja GRA, and they're making their money. So I think you have to figure out what your skills strengths are, what your passion is, and what your area of expertise is, and then enter that space. But even leather, you know, somebody told me they go to Kanu, they fly from Italy to Kanu to buy leather, to make the bags that you guys buy for $8,000. And this is our leather. Do you understand? So that's just one aspect. That dairy, we're just about to start a 7-year dairy project with the Gates Foundation, linking Friesland Campina with all these cattle Fulani clusters in Oyo State, because we import 99% of the milk we consume. Meanwhile, we're the number one, we have the number one largest head of cattle in Africa. But yet we eat meat where we don't use the milk. That's an untapped opportunity. Domino's is importing all the cheese that it uses. Somebody needs to be processing that milk to produce cheese for Domino's. So I think we need to stop thinking about having a farm. I don't want to have a farm. Do you understand? That's not my area of expertise. You can't look as corporate as you want to on the farm. You have to really love farming to do farming well. The last thing I'll mention is with Ace Foods, when we started, we used to go every day. We had to fast and pray for a fantastic general manager. This year, I've only been 3 times. And our factory is in Sangota. And that's because we've built a team and we've put in place systems and structures. We have a board and the organization runs effectively. And that's to the glory of God.
Thank you. And Ndidi, maybe you could also address, I mean, the gentleman, he made a point, which I guess is valid, about the fact that a lot of the people we bring to speak are people who've had their education abroad. But in my own case, I mean, I did secondary school in Nigeria, so I count myself as haven't done my... Let me land. Okay. I count myself as having had my formative years in Nigeria. But look, I don't know about Dangote, but it doesn't... Wherever you are, you can succeed. I don't know that that is necessarily a limitation, but perhaps you guys could...
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I definitely don't think it's a limitation. I think what going abroad did for us, at least for me, is that it opened my mind to possibilities and allowed me to see what others are able to do and the opportunities in my own backyard. So you don't have to go to school abroad to get that. Just go to Ghana, go to Benin Republic. Anybody who wants to go to Benin Republic, I'll take you to Songhai Farms. How many of you have been to Songhai? In Benin Republic. You'll see the size of the okra he's growing. It's about this big. You'll see what they're able to accomplish just next door. And it just opens your mind to opportunities in your own backyard and removes the limitations. I think the most amazing experience I had was working in Ramallah in the Middle East, working with entrepreneurs in Jericho and Bethlehem, and them not being able to cross 20 minutes without showing a pass and passing through Israeli soldiers. And they told me, what are you here doing in our country, in Palestine, when yours is such a mess? You have freedom in Nigeria. You don't have limitations, but yet your mindset is limited. And I think that's what going abroad does for anybody.
Shall I quickly?
I'll just add to that. Yes, I did OND in Nigeria and things like that. But like Ndidi said, the biggest thing that it does, going abroad or living abroad just does for you is it just engages your brain, opens it up. Now, at Conga, I mentioned we have 130 engineers. About 100 of them are based in Lagos, 30 in Cape Town. Now, the 30 in Cape Town have more experience, they've worked in other places. But each time a new one comes in, he goes, you guys have some badass, some kick-ass developers. And these guys are all Nigerian. They literally studied in Nigeria. We try to pull them from CC Hub, universities, and they know this stuff. The only thing that we're trying to give them now is exposure. So they have more confidence in themselves. They know that they're actually up there in the world. And studying abroad, that's all it gives you. Honestly, like that's all it gives you. The mindset that, look, I'm educated and I can do anything.
Thank you for that point. Just to quickly answer the last one is how I monetize it. The one thing I didn't mention to you that once I knew that I had a natural flair for public speaking, one of the things I did, I don't know how many of you have heard of Toastmasters. It's essentially communication and public speaking classes. And I also took another one called Compelled to Communicate. The point I'm trying to make is, you know the parable of the talents, right? Each of them had a talent, right? But the fact that one of them did not use it meant it wasn't increased to him. If you ask any musician here, as a pianist, if I don't play the piano for a long time, after a while, I get rusty when I come back. But I have a natural talent which still needs to develop. So if you're going to monetize your speaking engagements, you have to do it, evolve it gradually over the course of a while. You may not want to charge. You want to build your reputation and your network and make sure that you're simultaneously developing your ability and your gifts in that area. And to be honest, benchmark yourself against, obviously, you're not going to be a Tony Blair who's doing speaking engagements. They pay him $10,000 just to come and talk for 30 minutes at Oxford University. Some of us may not get to that level, but the point is there is a lot we can offer. And if you benchmark against what people are charging in the industry, you can start small and build that over time. And sometimes what I do is I waive the actual speaking expenses if they're going to cover my flight and accommodation fully. But again, you just have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. And as long as it doesn't conflict directly with your current employment, if you're an employee, that would be my contribution. Do we have more questions? There's a hand there, just in the middle.
This question particularly directs to Shola. I play in the tech industry, but I'm not so interested in all the coding and hardcore stuff. So because of my exposure, I have a couple of ideas here and there. But it comes to a time where you come across this barrier of, okay, for instance, I have idea for some apps, and then all I have to think next is, how do I get to developers somewhere in Palestine, somewhere outside the country? You have all these guys there. From your experience, are there any pools of developers that you could run ideas by? I mean, not necessarily those who would probably want to have a stake in your idea, maybe going to the likes of CC Hub. Are there some Nigerians that I can lay my hands upon? Okay, I have this idea, I have all the concepts built out. Who are the guys out there that can, help to flesh it out?
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse. We also have another question here from someone who says, I'm an aspiring e-commerce platform owner with interest in agricultural e-commerce. What are the logistic challenges that I may expect, and what is your advice to overcoming them? So please hold that, and we'll take one more before we open it to the panel. Over there.
Good evening, House. My name is Paul. My question goes to Ndidi. She keeps mentioning processing. I want to ask you how easy it is for someone who has interest in food processing. Because I used to be a member of the National Association of Small and Medium Enterprise, Lagos State Chapter. And I know my chairman, for like 3 years, he applied for the BOI loan. And up to the time I left, he's still here to get access to that 20 million naira loan. Early last year, I myself, I went into cassava production. I didn't until when I started producing cassava, I took the processed food to the market, various markets. It was then I got to realize that it is men that eat fufu. And it is the woman that comes to the market. I asked them, are you not going to buy this fufu for your husband? They will tell me they don't eat it. Because they don't eat it, the men that eat it don't come to the market to buy. I got frustrated and I left. So my question to you is that how easy it is for those who have the intention of food processing to get access to loan? Thank you.
We got the gist, which is on food processing. So please go ahead. Maybe you can also take the first question as well.
Okay. Okay. So the first one is around getting developers. At the moment, I mentioned earlier on that it's a huge opportunity. It's a space that's not been tapped enough. you have Andela. I mean, there are some companies out there that literally code for Facebook, Microsoft. They're based in Yaba. Microsoft, Facebook would actually outsource some work to them, and they're based in Yaba. You can contact them. I can guarantee you they'll be very expensive for a startup. But again, it's about networking. If you want to find these guys, it's networking. I can introduce you to some if you want afterwards. It's literally networking, knowing the guys that I don't mind. Look, I just build the app for you, and I move, and you pay me, and I work. You will find them. They're out there. You just need to look harder and tap into the industry. That's number one. The second one is around agriculture.
E-commerce, agriculture.
Agriculture for e-commerce. I mean, first of all, I think apart from logistics, you also have to think through your technology, the front end, the way people would buy agricultural produce will be very, very different from your typical e-commerce site. And when you come to logistics, storage is, I think, your biggest, what you have to think about first is storage. Where do you store them? And is there depending on what you're moving, I mentioned earlier on about cold chain logistics. If you're moving tomatoes from north or strawberries, it has to be kept in a particular temperature. Because once it gets to the other side, somebody does the quality testing. If it doesn't meet it, you've lost money, because the guy that gave it to you on the other hand, on the other side, expected you to deliver it in a particular condition. So understanding the conditions in which you need to transfer the produce is super important. And maybe from that, you begin to decide what kind of produce you're going to put up. With cassava, you don't have so much of a challenge in terms of temperature, but you need to get it there within a certain number of days, because the starch
so Shola, I would ask, just for the purposes of those who are not quite sure, what does agricultural e-commerce look like? Is it buying and trading agricultural goods on the online platform?
Yeah, so you can actually trade online platform, but it's a bit more, it's slightly different, because if I'm buying agricultural produce, I'm giving you specifications. So it's not just a phone. I click buy, and I'm expecting, I know what some iPhone should look like. But with agriculture, if I request for cassava, I want a particular starch content, a certain percentage. So I'm asking for all of those things. So even as a logistics provider or an e-commerce player, you're now finding the buyer who understands those requirements and can produce to me. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have anyway is finding people, educated people that will go into agriculture that can meet the requirements. So your biggest challenge is even finding people that will meet the requirement, and then next is in what condition must it be delivered? And that determines the kind of trucks or air freight or whatever it is that you want to use, the means of transportation.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Ndidi, you have some
but
comments?
just to build on that, I would say that we shouldn't limit it to just commodities, which is what I think Shola has discussed. With commodities, you need standards. Met me the other day. She has a fantastic idea using e-commerce for flowers. Now, in other parts of the world, I can go on to 1-800-Flowers, and I can order flowers. My sister has just had a baby. She lives in Enugu. There should be a florist there who can just cut flowers and deliver to her. In Nigeria, we don't have that. She's just started it, but I think there's so many opportunities in agriculture. We shouldn't just think about commodity e-commerce. Across the board, there are opportunities to supply produce or to supply components of the agricultural value chain to individuals and to provide information. Now, so the question around processing. I think there's tremendous amounts of money right now for processing. Rockefeller just announced a $1 million innovation grant, which means it's free, for people who have ideas around how to improve cassava processing in Nigeria. So in every space, and you can meet me afterwards, and there's a colleague of mine who's here, we can give you some links to opportunities for funding. The challenge is that if you're a startup with no experience, it's very hard for people to take a chance on you. So if you start working for somebody or you build some track record, then it allows people to say, great idea, I'll take a chance on him or her. I wanted to also mention that when we think about processing in Nigeria, there are a few barriers to processing. One is the supply chain issue. How can you guarantee enough quantity of what you're supplying, of what you need as raw materials for your production? The second is the equipment that you require. Sadly, we have very few very strong fabricators. So that's another business idea there. Fabricators for agricultural equipment and food processing equipment. And then the third one is distribution. Many Nigerians don't want to buy proudly Nigerian products. It took us 4 years to get into ShopRite. And in the beginning, they used to give us the lower shelves. Now, because they can't bring in Supreme and Nora, we keep on moving higher and higher and higher. Now we have fantastic shelf space. And that's what God can do, right? You enter in as an underdog, and now you're in the right position. So think out of the box. And the last thing I'll mention is that for the last 3 years, we've been doing a project with Benin Republic, Approach Communal Marché Agricole, helping farmers in Benin Republic access the Nigerian market. The other day, I saw their products. They have pineapple gari, coconut gari, and orange gari. It is fantastic. And they've taken it to all these fairs, and it sells out like hotcake. Now, this is gari that you can eat as a snack. And for those of you who like eating gari as a snack, people are willing to pay anything for it. Now, why have Nigerians left Benin Republic to come up with pineapple gari, coconut gari? I mean, when you taste it, you understand. So when I think about processing, doing fufu is not good enough. You need to move beyond fufu and think about the next innovation, not just for today, but for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we still have time for last set. But before we do that, I mean, we seem to have had a lot of interest in agriculture and processing. So can I just see a show of hands? How many people think they're interested in agriculture and the value chain? I just have, okay. So one of the things I always like to ask people is, can you perhaps, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but can you name 3 conferences in the agricultural industry or 3 books in the agricultural industry? You can't. Okay, well, the point I'm trying to make is we often talk about networking, right? And you'd be surprised a lot of people who are interested in a particular sector haven't yet even started to do the research. And this is a general point. It affects all of us. So how would you get to meet the industry stakeholders or the people who are on the regulatory side, the people who are on the investment side? And this may involve some level of personal financial sacrifice. And that is, it also applies to your training. And I think it's an important point to bear. So if you're into energy, you want to go into energy, start to educate yourselves on some of these areas. So can we just see a show of hands for the last batch questions? There's one just there in the corner.
Okay, goodness. Thank you. So I'm just going to make a statement and then ask my question. So the statement is, there was a food conference I attended very recently, and it was interesting to find out that most of the people that came for that food conference came from outside Nigeria. And it happened at Eco Hotel, and it was really, really interesting. There were a lot of vendors there looking to distribute their products in Nigeria, and most of them were from outside the country. Very few Nigerians were there. And there was a session, and it was like a lot of discussion and stuff. NAFDAC, SON, plenty of people came, and they had a lot of information to give out to people. NAFDAC is doing something where they're actually registering kitchen businesses, like one-man kitchen businesses for about 10,000 naira. And you can register and, start your business. SON has grants for people, and the grant is basically, if you have an idea, they're not giving to one person. So a group of people form an association and come and meet SON, and you can access the fund. But they want to impact like a group of people in a sector, not just one person, so that it will have a bigger impact on the economy and the population as a whole. But my question is, there's an issue with access to information, really. How do we bridge that gap where if you need information on something, you easily get it? Because, for example, myself, I was looking for information on how to access maybe people that are into soybean, for example, and it's difficult to get that information. And then you find yourself struggling because you're trying to get information you're not getting and you're making no headway. Thank you.
Thank you, Chikazem. And we'll take one from the audience, and I've got a couple to read out. So can we just have the gentleman in the back there?
Hi, good evening all. Yeah, I'm Cesar Keluro by name. What she just asked about information. Part of our experience working in the media space was we've been providing media buying services for a while, and there are a lot of changes in the marketplace. So we decided to begin to look at how do we serve the agricultural sector, and we signed up a deal with a company in the Middle East that provides data, that provides real-time information about quantity of products from fruits, vegetables, and co. So if you need information regarding the Middle Eastern market, we have ready information available. We have data that you can work with. We can set up meetings if you have anything to export to the Middle East. And I think that's that should be useful for now.
Okay, thank you. Just one more lady here. The question, please. Let's take that. And I think that would have to be the final one before these ones.
Hi, everyone. My question is for Shola. At the moment, I'm a merchant on Konga. And I'm just trying to take it to the next level, like become like an wholesaler on Konga. And I've been discussing it with your people, but it's like it's difficult. So I just want to know, is it possible to sell wholesale on Konga? Thank you.
Okay, and just two questions which are actually related, addressed to Ndidi. You spoke about appointing a board of directors at the idea stage of her company. What sort of remuneration, if any, were you able to offer the directors with that level of expertise, considering the nascent state of the company? The second question is, you spoke about the need for every entrepreneur or business owner to have a board of directors. Kindly share your personal experience on how to form a board of directors. So maybe you can take the question and information. Those two were related. And Shola, you can respond to the lady on upscaling on e-commerce.
Okay, so in terms of information, I think that's a business opportunity right there, my dear. So you can take it up. Come to Sahel Capital, we'll give you tons of information that's available to us. There should just be one section on financing. Just yesterday, a guy came from the United States who's been spent the week with young entrepreneurs, training them, and they have a fund. They want to give 10 people money. And every day we hear about these opportunities, and yet the average Nigerian doesn't know where to find them. And so you have a business opportunity there. Get started. You already seem like you have a lot of great knowledge. And then you can talk to me about soya beans after. I've done a lot of work on soya beans, so I can help you there. In terms of boards, let me tell you, it doesn't matter how small you are. You can start with a board. Every board needs to have a finance person, a lawyer, a brand expert, and a subject matter expert. And if you find people who share your values and who have a lot of value to add, you don't have to pay them anything. Because
what about an HR expert? Because that's quite
HR is important, but not exactly when you're starting. Because that comes later as you have more employees. Leap has written a very good book called Get on Board, which I recommend all of you should get. We did not pay our board members when we started. And when they would see our financials, they'll say, please don't pay. You're not ready to pay us. But we would give them products and we'll make them feel very special. There are other ways to compensate people.
And presumably, I guess being a board member means you buy somewhat into the long-term vision of the company. So remuneration would not necessarily be
that's not why they're coming to the table. They want to know you're going to use their time effectively and you're professional and your meetings are, very disciplined and effective. And they learn a lot from being on your board. And clearly, you make them sign non-compete and confidentiality forms from the beginning so that you don't have people who are going to try and replicate your business idea. There are great people around you who want to serve, but don't start with your friends and family.
Yeah.
You need people who hold you accountable. When you want a salary increase, you should be scared that you're going to have to convince them that even though you haven't made a profit, you want a salary increase. Those are the type of that's the type of rigor that every entrepreneur needs. And I think I serve on boards, and I've constituted boards in every organization I've started. And board experience is useful. You can see that I now serve on some larger boards, and that's because I gained experience on smaller boards as well. So don't be looking for the big boards first, and don't only be looking for big names to serve on your board.
I mean, the one point I would add to that is if it's not for profit, constituting the board has different considerations. Now, if you're a company where you've had a private equity investor, for instance, they will have a requirement around who they appoint to your board, for instance. So those may be some of the subtle differences.
With Sahel Capital, when we invest in existing businesses, we take board seats. Yeah. But that's for startups. I was referring to startups. So as your business is growing, obviously your investors have a say in who gets to sit on your board. And then those boards obviously are compensated.
All right. Okay, Shola, the question on upscaling to sort of wholesale on the e-commerce platform.
It's more for retail. Individuals coming to buy, and the wholesale that we do is actually in the back end. So again, if you send an email to corporatesales@konga.com, they'll be able to take your details and help you with marketing your products. If you have products that are in huge quantities, not only do we, I mean, the only people that we can sell it to at the moment are merchants or our corporate clients who would want to buy bulk. So at the moment, the website is designed more for individuals who want to pick and buy, literally for retail, not wholesale at this point in time. And that's when I was talking about technology. The technology to build a wholesale website is totally different, and it requires a lot of effort, development work, which we're not there yet. We're just focusing on retail at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much, Shola. I mean, we've heard quite a lot from the panel, and I just want you to help me in joining me in thanking them, actually. And please feel free to continue your questions. There was just one thought I wanted to leave you with, and a lot of you have probably heard this said: if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I think that's something we can all go away with when we think about how we want to improve ourselves and embark on this journey of development, which is a really key part of building sustainable wealth. So I'll hand over to Pastor Shola Adeola to round off.
Can we give them a really big round of applause? Now, you can see that they all had a lot they wanted to share, and they did pack a lot into what they said. I would advise everybody to get the CDs so you can actually sit down and really digest a lot of the information that was shared this evening. Thank you all very, very much. You can now come back. So I'll hand over to Pastor G.
Thank you so much. Let's give them another round of applause. If you just, for the people that are leaving, if you just give us 3 minutes, we'll be done quickly. I like the question about schooling abroad. I did school abroad, so certainly it gives you advantage. But you know, if you didn't school abroad, and like me, instead of spending 4 years for a 4-year program, but you spent 7 years for a 4-year program, I mean, it develops some resilience in you. There is no scare, you know, that can come to you for people that went to Nigerian universities. Are they here? You know, all of these guys that went abroad, 3.5 years, their 4-year program is over. If you go to Nigerian university, you know, unless it's private, but if you go to any of the public universities, you can't finish in 4 years. You know? So if you didn't go abroad, anywhere you are, what is important is that God is with you. Whether you went abroad or you didn't go abroad, He opens up spaces for you anywhere you are. So it's not a matter of where you schooled. It is a matter of what you are connected to. Amen. There was a time I spoke a little bit somewhere, and I was speaking about sight and mobility. I think many of the speakers, there was something they spoke about, what it's about, not just passion, but vision, having a vision of what you want to do. And I think that for as many of us, when you connect to a vision or you connect to somebody else's vision, have a plan that is long-term. You have to have that plan that is long-term. And it's not about, hey, I want to join this because I want to make money. I think all of them said it, that look, if you want to do this because of money, it's short-sighted. But if you do this because you have a passion of the reason why you want to do it, then money will follow. Because if you chase money, you will lose passion. But if you chase passion, you find money. You know? So please, thank you. So for many of us, as we live today, it will be a shame if you don't do anything with what you've heard. If you want to make a change, You don't need to wait for the next conference. Tonight, on your phone, you can begin to do that research. Tonight, you can begin to write down a few things you want to do. Tonight, you can just start to do something that you never done before. Otherwise, all of what you've heard today, in the next 2-3 days, you start forgetting. Amen. And I pray that God will help every one of us, that what we've heard, it will multiply in our spirit, and it will give you the opportunities. He's always giving us an opportunity anyway, but it will give you wisdom to recognize and seize the opportunity. And it will connect you to the right people and the right persons. There is still favor, remember? There is still favor that comes from God. It can connect you even today, in the line or the area where you are passionate about. So I pray that God will indeed give you that grace to succeed in everything that you lay your hands upon to do in Jesus.